Hello, everyone. I'm super excited to have Anne Bologna here with us today. Anne, why don't you get us started by telling us a little bit about what you're up to these days and some of your background?
All right. What am I up to these days? Well, I am the Chief Strategy Officer in a independent global media agency that's been around for 24 years, and I've been with this particular agency for going on six. And so I came to, it was already a strategic media planning oriented agency, but I came to build out the strategy practice, take it to kind of the next level. As you can imagine, media is quite complex these days, to say the very least. And so, strategy, which is often providing an organizing principle for how a marketer does what they do, it's been a great challenge, and it's a great place. And I spent the first, in terms of my background, I spent the first over half of my career on the integrated creative side of the business. I was at Fallon for 18 years. I had my own creative agency. I had a client side gig, but about 12, 13 years ago, I shifted into media as a strategist just because a lot of action goes on there. It's super interesting.
I love that. The number of people I know that are really great strategists that have worked or tried to work in media and not found their footing. You've been doing it for a while now.
Yeah.
And I mean, honestly, the media marketplace is 10 times more complicated than it was even like last week. So tell us a little bit about that. Like, what are some of the things that you're seeing relative to like a classic strategist? Frankly, strategy is strategy, right? At some level, and then you have to apply it, narrow down. But like, tell us a little bit about how you went from where you were and then helped really kind of dial in when in the media world.
Yeah. Well, I could answer that in a lot of different ways, but I'll start with the big picture that um, strategy, when you're a strategist in a creative agency, your first job is to provide a brief to the creative department. And yet, I think some of the best strategists, especially over time, you realize we like business strategy, we like marketing strategy, we like broad communication strategy. And so much of that applies to how a brand goes to market, which is much more the orientation of a media agency. Saying nothing bad about creative agencies, because boy, when you do magic, when you create magic there, it is transformational for a business. So all due respect to that whole, creative strategist side of the business. But I find personally it much more satisfying, especially at this stage of my career, having done, creative strategy for so long. I really enjoy the media strategy, comm strategy side of things because we are so much closer to the business challenges. It's media is all about reporting results and outcomes and KPIs, and that just plays to my sensibility. I'm just a holistic thinker, and I'm a business person. I just happen to have strategy in my title, I've always said, and I love the agency side because I always call it pattern recognition. We get to look across a lot of clients and apply those themes and patterns to individual client businesses, which I also really enjoy.
I love that. So much of what I struggle with just personally around a lot of the media stuff is it's very much look back. Right? And what we really need to be able to do is see around the corner. How do you balance that
Yeah.
tension? And do you have like any like structural approaches or team member approaches or tools
Yeah.
that are super good at that?
Well, I think you get to the heart of that question, gets to the heart of, again, what good strategy is meant to do, which is about leveraging insight, number one. And in a media agency, we have a barrage, we have a wealth, almost an endless, um, well of data. But a good strategist does what? They triangulate data points. Some of them we often call human intelligence, business intelligence, media intelligence. We sort of combine those three plus things, plus the four C's: culture, category, consumer, all of that, into a single leverageable insight that can be used to drive what we like to call a comm strategy, which we're careful not to make it sound like a a creative strategy or even a creative platform or a brand platform. I mean, I've done that for a living, so I know how to spin a tale that way or create a nice magical statement, but we're careful to make sure that it's very tied to very directly to the role media can play to help accomplish those business goals. But it really is about turning an insight into something actionable, relevant to the your area of expertise, which in our case is media. And again, that gets into the big picture situation around what is media. Media is that connection point between a brand and a consumer. And Marshall McLuhan was right. Actually, the media is the message, and the message is the media. And that's more true than ever when you look at TikTok and when you look at how I'm also finding that experiential and real life experiences are becoming much more important, especially for Gen Z, as that digital people are exhausted by being tied to their phones all the time. So,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
yep.
I find one of the things in the creative realm that I always push back against is creative testing. Is there an equivalent that you face in the media world?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, Having a learning agenda, test and learn. I mean, media, any self-respecting media agency, which we definitely are, proposes to our clients almost constantly a test and learn scenario because the market tells you what is working and what isn't working. Measurement. We also Crossmedia. We've always had a reputation for being pretty sophisticated in the area of measurement. And so, I always call all of the data that we get and the ability to test and learn and the ability to see almost instantly what the marketplace is responding to. I always call that catnip to a strategist because, we're insanely curious and we are really all about problem solving and we are really all about outcomes and effects. We're not a good strategist is really not overly precious about anything other than the problem to solve.
So I'm not overly familiar with the way that media shops do or should structure their strategy
Mm,
operations. Very familiar with it in the creative world and a little bit in the media world, although I think it varies a lot by shop. Talk a little bit about
yeah.
how you've built and kind of nurtured that practice within your group.
Yep. For there's always the new business piece, right? New business strategists, tend, and especially a CSO, part of a big, huge chunk of their job is pitching business because it's all that storytelling about possibilities. But I liken it's interesting you asked that question too. I liken the strategist, and we have a strategy group with strategists in it. It's its own department, if you will. But what in a creative department or in a creative agency, what is a copywriter, art director in terms of the engine of the company that makes the work? Media planner and a strategist are really that engine. And I think the flankers are really important flankers, which makes it a foursome. Are the data analytics team, which in our case we call it red box because we don't have a black box. We have a red box, kind of a whole story around that. But a data analytics person because media throws off a lot of signals, a lot of data, and then the person who's in the marketplace or what we call activation, which are the people that are in the platforms actually seeing daily results and reporting on those results. It's like the copywriter, art director are the planner, the media planner, and the strategist, and then we're flanked by data and the what's happening in activation, what's happening in the marketplace. I mean, that's really it in a nutshell.
I like that. Um, I want to go back to you touched on Redbox. Tell me a little bit about
Yeah.
that. And then as a follow on, I'm often pushing our team to think through the lens of what KPIs matter to our client,
Yeah.
but what KPIs matter to our audience? And I
Mm,
feel like that's a gap that gets left off
mm,
dashboarding and or like, key metrics. It's like all we care about is, cart completes or whatever it
mm.
is, right? And the reality is if we stood back and thought about what the audience we're trying to influence would
Yeah.
really care about, there might be
Yeah.
learnings there that would be mutually beneficial. And in the end, isn't it always about the harmony between the shared interest of what we need and what they're looking for?
Yeah. Definitely. I think there's the hierarchy of KPIs, and if we always actually a measurement framework is as much a part of the upstream strategic process as it is downstream in the reporting. Because to your point earlier about looking backwards, you want to say, are we even measuring the right things? Given that this is our comm strategy that reflects our business and marketing goals, are we measuring the right thing? And there's a hierarchy. And we start with what is that consumer effect we want? Most brands have some sort of an awareness and a consideration problem. Too much of one and not enough of the other sometimes, or not enough of either, which is really what media can do because reach and frequency is still a thing. And you've got to reach the right people, and you've got to hit them enough times for it to register. And even hitting them, on Instagram, if you hit them once, they can be, one click away from a conversion. So we know all that. But to answer your question, it's really about a hierarchy of KPIs that start with what is the consumer effect we want to achieve? Do we want to create brand affinity? We have all kinds of tools in a media agency, one of which, in the whole set is, good old fashioned social listening. And, we can, social listening is really just like an X-ray vision into what humans are saying about your brand and your category and your competitors. And so we will build all of those human and consumer effects into the upstream measurement around what we want the consumer KPI to be. Absolutely. And then it goes down into the business effects, the business results, and then all the way down into, because what our industry has become way too obsessed with is, little micro media KPIs, ROAS, return on ad spend, number of clicks, and all that. But I think there's definitely, I would say in the last 12 months, there's been a bit of a shift away from just performance, performance, performance. Full funnel is important. Brand and performance is, a balance is important. A lot of the RFPs that we get have the same story. We pushed the pedal to the metal on performance media in the last X number of years, insert brand here. And by the way, we really need to show up our brand without losing, performance. So business performance, business effects.
So, two questions. One, I imagine there's some brief-like object.
Absolutely.
And I'm curious how frequently you socialize that with your creative partners and how,
Mm.
and what that looks like and the degree to which they share theirs.
Totally. I feel like I feel like I'm pandering, but you ask very good questions. You should do a podcast. Um, no,
Someday we'll get around to that.
yeah, exactly. It's really the operative question. To use this phrase, the holy grail for us, one of my observations when I first got into, what is now currently a full funnel media agency, is the ability for us to align both the timelines and the briefs for creative and media. Because messaging and media we call it the original sin of advertising when creative left the building and media went off on its own. Very much a very firm belief of our founder, and it's the reason the agency exists. And so, our aim is to have a single brief that is relevant for both messaging and media. That certainly doesn't happen all the time, but at least we align the timetables, and absolutely we share briefs and insights and collaborate. That is one of the things that not only have we been known for, but we're definitely known for that. And because I spent a lot of time on the creative side. Sometimes the creative strategists or the creatives, they're like, what do you know? You're a media person. My existence gives us a little bit of a right to be truly engaged with the media side of briefing. We do have a brief that we call a media planning springboard. It looks and feels a lot like a creative brief, although it's much richer because we do have a lot more data and information to put into that. It's also helpful for our activation teams to go to market and get RFPs from the media platforms. And we find the richer the brief, it's like anything. The richer the brief, the better the stuff you get back. Right? It's the same as in a creative agency, but We are incredibly collaborative with our creative partners. And actually, you may have heard about this or read about this, but we have one of the creative agencies that, we associate with is called Joan, and we formalized a partnership. We call it Joan X Media. We have one of our media executive client directors, media directors, sits in their offices once a week, and the founder, creative director Jamie, she can't get enough of her. They go out to lunch, they go on diets together, they have all kinds of.
I love
I
that.
probably just overshared,
Right.
you know, but no, it's really heartening to see because having grown up at Fallon where there was full service media and really world class creative, I sat in the center of all that, and I don't know how to do it any other way. And so it's the I, but it's also, part of cross media and part of the team that's been built.
So, uh, one of the things that this business has done to itself is having a shiny box, shiny object syndrome, right? It's and even
Hype as well.
well, and even repackaging the obvious. I always made fun of Faith Popcorn, who's brilliant in many ways and brilliant as a marketer, but
Yeah.
like cocooning wasn't necessarily a new concept. It was a new in the way she framed it. But sold a lot of books and we all read it and good for
Totally.
her. But like, so what are the shiny objects you're seeing? Because I know things like, semiotics are a thing that people talk about,
Totally. Yep.
marketing mix modeling.
Yep.
I think that there's actually so much data that we drown in it as opposed to actually thrive because of it.
Yep. I
But
think, AI is obviously, it's more than a shiny object. It is a real thing, and I think it is going to be quite transformational. Synthetic audiences, synthetic market testing, synthetic data that is just that. It's not real people, but it operates like it. I mean, our team has had personal experience with synthetic audiences, with synthetic markets. Um, and so that's a shiny object. I think well, like I said, AI is not a shiny object. It also is a shiny object because there's a lot of hype around it, and I think it's like anything, you need to break it down and ask yourself where and how can it best be useful. What are the guardrails that you want to place around it? We already, you've seen the headlines about the fact that many data sets, LLMs, they actually get worse at hallucinating. We've seen that ourselves. So, like anything, proceed with caution and be smart about it. But definitely, that's a big one. You know, uh, multi-touch attribution (MTA) before media mix modeling was the shiny object. It was legitimate until it wasn't, with cookies going away and all of that. And I mean, listen, measurement is a quagmire. Measurement is hard. And I joke often about the old line. You don't, half of my media is wasted. I don't know which half. The problem now is we actually think we know which half, and we're measuring too much of the wrong things.
yeah, exactly.
So that's really become, kind of the issue. But
Yeah, I find I worked on a ISP account where it was value focused, entirely value focused, and because of the data, the team ignored the highest wealth individuals because they're not going to buy a
mm,
low value brand. And yet when we actually started, and the data said don't.
oh,
They'd done different executions in the past that didn't work, and yet when we went back and retested it, it became our number one like best market. And so we still stayed with value, but we moved into a space of just relating through different ideas, and it totally turned the company upside down. I mean, it like made them millions and millions and millions. Do you have any examples where the data was telling you one thing, but then testing your way in and trying other things, or kind of led you to a place of success that you intuitively thought might be there, but
Totally. One of my favorite stories, this goes back, back in the days when, when I was a creative strategist, I was also trained as a moderator, went through training. And, we were doing some focus groups on, humans lie, right? Behavior doesn't, but humans, we lie about to ourselves actually. But, we did, global focus groups around the world about, a piece of technology, and it was a bright color, and it wasn't black, and all this. And every single focus group, after several of them, a projectable number of them, for qual anyway, said that they would never buy it. And then we tried and we got bored with hearing the same thing over and over again when the client paid for all this research. And we finally did a little experiment where we actually put, the old version, the black version, and then the bright yellow version outside the focus group, and let people take the one they wanted. And almost to a person, they took the colorful one. So their behavior belied what they said, so you have to be careful. And, another little data point is that there was a lot of client data that you could infer where the traffic was coming from. So they wanted to double down on, being in that media. And then we found with some additional digging that a huge percentage of the referral traffic that went to their website that actually converted was coming from Reddit. And what we were able to diagnose from that is that the product is a piece of clothing, and it actually was kind of it claimed to absorb your sweat. And so people were going on Reddit to find out more about that, to go to research and get some human opinion about whether this stuff really worked, or is it good for your skin, or they had all these questions. And so a huge percentage of their convertible traffic was being referred from Reddit, which was a huge surprise at the time.
I love that. Um, when I think of media, honestly, I struggle to define it almost, because what
Yeah.
isn't media on
Yeah.
some level, right? Obviously, you have to put it in, lanes and package it. But, to your point, Reddit is media, both paid and earned, and in some cases owned. Discord, same, et cetera. Do you do quite a bit to do internal messaging programs for the clients you work with?
We don't do as internal, like on the owned, we don't do internal messaging, but we do SEO, we do search engine optimization, which leverages, internal digital platforms, obviously, because you want to get, high in ranking. Um, but yeah, I think you're hitting, though, on something incredibly important and yet challenging in the media space, which is we all know, both by data and intuitively, that paid, earned, and owned together, and media and messaging integrated, connected, is the best way to go to market. And yet, systems aren't set up that way. We have clients that have multiple agencies. Even, on rare occasion, for a big global client, there might even be a, other global media agency, which is difficult because media is like your go-to-market, connection point. So the definition, if you like the definition of, which I do, of media as that connection point between a brand and a consumer, literally the connection point. Paid, earned, and known should be orchestrated, together. And yet the measurement of some of those owned and earned isn't quite as clean in a world of MMMs and in a world of results. And the paid media part is the bit on the spreadsheet that the client has to look at and show their bosses that they're getting a return on that. So, that's why it gets back to, framing up the measurement framework and the KPIs and agreeing on that ahead of time so that we have a full cadence and a full spectrum of a hierarchy, if you will, of what's being measured and what's important.
That makes sense. Um, as a strategist, where do you go to get your inspiration? Like, what are the secret
Yeah,
places to like, where do you gather those bits and pieces,
yeah.
and get your head in that space that you need to be in to go and tackle something?
Yeah. Well, we all know the bad news about the digital world, throwing off all kinds of, jillions and jillions of data points. But it's also, the data universe is a world into consumer behavior. So I'll do anything from drop keywords into TikTok just to in their search TikTok by dropping keywords in there about the category or a product, and all of a sudden you get served up a bunch of human behavior about how they might, look for, a cough drop, how they might, what they're doing, where they might get financial advice, depending on what our client is. So the TikTok search bar is actually a hidden secret, I think, because it's also not what people are saying; it's what they're doing, right? And they're doing it in a very dramatic, entertaining, exceedingly human way. So I think that's a good source. I mean, I think people still underestimate Google search. What people are searching for is a window into a world, literally a world of human intention, which is what Google search is. Obviously, that is being affected by AI. Gemini is coming up first, and that is affecting search. But search data is a wealth. Nothing. There is no substitute for human observation. Watching people. That's one of the reasons I love living in an urban environment like New York. Is walking down the street. You just watching humans, or being on the subway, watching humans do what they do. You know. We think we want to be adventuresome, for instance, but then, people aren't always, they want to be adventuresome within the confines of, no risk, or, there's just the human condition. So, human observation, all the data sources are available. I think I have a renewed passion for social listening, because I do think, one of the examples is we gave a client some information about their competitive set, and based on social listening, based on pretty dramatic, consistent millions of data points on social listening, and they go, "Well, that's not our competitive set." I said, "Well, your customers see that as your competitive set. So we want to rethink how we articulate our competitive set. Things like that. I mean, that's incredibly insightful. So I also think YouTube, but the search bar on any of these digital platforms are incredibly rich. And like I say, we have had experience with synthetic audiences. You can, we have an AI research platform that we just recently signed up with 6 months ago, and what used to take, anywhere from 3 days to 2 weeks to do research. You basically just query, you can ingest any piece of research or syndicated research that's out there, and you just ask it a query and you get back an answer. Now, those answers aren't necessarily a big insightful leap, but it's basically grounding you in some information that would have taken you a lot longer to get.
I love it. Um, Talk for a second about examples of where the strategic work you've done has helped the team find a channel mix, or a channel that really just turned everything,
Mm,
like set it free.
yeah.
Because I think, that's one of the things that I've definitely experienced several times, is where one aspect of, or the combination of, network radio and this all of a sudden just unlocked this magical kind of success for the brand.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about some examples of successes you've had in that regard.
Yep. I think one of the most dramatic was for one of the car rental companies. And, again, like I said earlier, the agency had gotten known over the years as being, pretty advanced in measurement, and as MTA at the time, but now MMM. And, through a very, very sophisticated set of, data connections, we were able to show them that they were significantly, disproportionately investing in search. And, they had long earlier hit the point of diminishing return. And so that justified them shifting their entire lower funnel budget to upper funnel, demonstrating that it's the brand work that video and TV, CTV or otherwise, that was driving most of the submits and ultimately the car rental conversion metrics that they valued so deeply. So that was an incredibly visible big picture advantage. And then it happens, we have a financial services client where they too were very focused on lower funnel, submits, they called it, which were, getting customers signing up for checking accounts and such. But we were able to let them know one of the cultural insights was, especially post pandemic, consumers were craving joy, places big and small to find joy. And so joy became, a linchpin in the brief, enjoy life, which actually that was one of the briefs that informed a singular calm strategy, informed both creative and messaging. And the creative was really about this idea that, be smart with your money so you can, so you can have more fun in life. You know what I mean? So it was kind of that juxtaposition. So those are two examples.
I love it. So I always like to think of people and companies really as having superpowers, and whether it's their brand strategy or proposition or whatever, but superpower just seems like a more fun word to me.
Yeah.
So what are Anne's superpowers, and then what are Cross Media's
All
superpowers?
right. Right. Um, you know, well, it sounds like kind of braggy, but I think I was born as a strategist. I was a strategist when I was a kid. I was the one that would, people would come to for advice and I'd be able to sort things out. And, I consider myself, insightful about the human condition, which is really helpful, and a simplifier. But I think my personal superpower is to get to what I often call the inevitable answer. That doesn't mean it's always obvious, but it resonates. Like it just feels like the right answer. I think in strategy, especially in creative strategy, there generally isn't one right answer, but there's definitely an answer that is right for the situation, right for the consumer, hits at that sweet spot. And I do think I work very, very hard at just finding truth. That whole consumer truth, and then turning that into a truth for what the messaging should be in the creative side, and the media side. It's the truth that can really inform a media strategy that is going to resonate, that's going to inform how media goes to market, and help media planners know how to, to your question about upper lower funnel, like we need to invest. We have very low, the opinion consumers have of the brand is literally impeding your ability to make all those lower funnel tactics work hard, Mr. and Mrs. Client. You know what I mean? Like those are insights. So anyway, hopefully that answers your question.
No, that's great. Now, Cross Media, what are the superpowers of Cross Media?
Part of the reason I feel very in sync with the agency, just intuitively, and again, I've had a longer relationship with the agency than just my recent being employed. I was my media partner when I had a creative agency back in the day. But cross media's superpower is very much about, there's a word we use, the strategic part of our process is called the reason phase. What is the reason for what we're doing? And obviously because we're data driven, but I think the agency has always been inherently strategic, and reason is part of one of our principles for how we do what we do for our clients. And so we're sort of maniacal about getting to the right answer. I mean, the mantra as the agency is called, we do media the right way, which sounds deceptively simple. It's like, well, why would you not do it the right way? But there's a lot of not doing media the right way out there in the marketplace. And so my values of getting to that right answer and really applying the right amount of, our process is, we've got a process obviously, but it's called intelligent intuition. And I think that pretty much captures the notion of intelligence, which can come from data, but also human intelligence with a healthy dose of the art part, which is intuition and being able to make a leap, because we are, again, back to your point about backward looking. The role of a strategist, creative media, or whatever it is to paint a brighter picture of a future that doesn't exist today.
Yeah, no, I love how your philosophy. I mean, I'm sure that's why you're such a great fit there, is the
Mhm.
combination of your belief system and the way you actually come to work every day, and
Yeah.
how it's really delivering. That's great. So my last question, this has been fantastic. My last question, the movie and Bologna is coming out soon. What is it? What's the title of the movie?
Wow, that's such a good question. I could say
Is it a comedy? Is it a
oh,
drama? Is it a
oh my God. It's probably a comedy. I always have always said I take my work and, the important things very seriously, but I do not take myself seriously, overly seriously for sure. So I was thinking, I had a couple thoughts which are terrible. But let's see, the name of the movie is called, I'm just stumped. I have so many thoughts.
that's the name of it? I'm just stumped. No, as a strategist, that can't be it.
Exactly. That's the worst possible answer. No, I think it's about, the name of the movie is Chill Out People, I think.
Like it.
Because I do think people can get chill out people. I think it's reflective of the fact that we tend to overcomplicate. We tend to overcomplicate in the business. I think people are very stressed out today in business and agency land, clients. But what I do, one of my other superpowers, I think, which is something I have sort of added to the agency world, both this one and others that I've worked in, is just staying calm, cool, and collected. Because at the end of the day, if you just wait now, settle down, and I think that's the role of a strategist, is to just stop, take a breath, step back, ask yourself, is this a big problem, a little problem, and how can we solve it? And most of the time, you can solve it by just breaking it down.
And this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. You've been an amazing guest. I look forward to getting this out and sharing it with everybody around the world, and perhaps having you back sometime in the future.
I'd love it. You
All
ask
right, Ann.
questions, Chris.
Awesome. All right. Thanks so much.